awaiting the first court appearance of actor Jussie Smollett later today, after the Empire star surrendered to police Chicago early this morning before dawn. Smollett is now accused of filing a false police report after telling authorities he was assaulted by two men hurling racist and anti-gay insults and a pro-Trump slogan. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Town Hall editor and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, Fox News contributor and national security analyst Morgan Ortegas, Fox News analyst and co-host of Benson and Harf on Fox News Radio, Marie Harf, and in the center seat, former press secretary for President George W. Bush and Fox News contributor Ari Fleischer. We say he's outnumbered, but you know what? He brings it. Good to see you.
Great to be back.
All right, let's get to the news. Such a busy day. Police say Smollett paid two brothers $3,500 to stage an attack as we look at the surveillance video showing the men buying supplies before the incident last month. They are now considered cooperating witnesses in the case, and Smollett has gone from victim to suspect. A short time ago, Chicago's police superintendent Eddie Johnson did not hold back his reaction to the alleged hoax.
I'm left hanging my head and asking why. Why would anyone, especially an African-American man, use the symbolism of a noose to make false accusations? How can an individual who's been embraced by the city of Chicago turn around and slap everyone in this city in the face by making these false claims?
Our Matt Finn is live in Chicago. Matt?
Harris, 20th Century Fox, which employs Jussie Smollett on the show Empire, just released a statement. Their tone is now changing. The statement reads in part, quote, "We understand the seriousness of this matter and we respect the legal process. We are evaluating the situation and we are considering our options." Throughout this ordeal, 20th Century Fox denied rumors that they were writing him off the show, but apparently they are now considering their options. Also, President Trump now weighing in on this on Twitter, writing, quote, "Jussie Smollett, what about MAGA and the tens of millions of people you insulted with your racist and dangerous comments?" Of course, police tell us that Jussie Smollett reported it was President Trump supporters that beat him, saying this is MAGA country, and also calling him racial and homophobic slurs. Police now deny those claims. The superintendent here in Chicago says that Smollett carried out this alleged hoax because he was upset about how much he was being paid on the show Empire. Police say Smollett paid the two brothers $3,500 for this alleged hoax with a promise of a $500 follow-up. Police also allege that Smollett did indeed craft that death threat letter and sent it to himself, a serious federal crime. Chicago Police Superintendent says the city of Chicago embraced this actor, and then he turned around and slapped the city in the face.
Absolute justice would be an apology to this city that he smeared, admitting what he did, and then be man enough to offer what he should offer up in terms of all the resources that were put into this.
The Chicago police chief says that the two brothers linked to this case agreed to testify against Smollett in the 47th hour of their 48-hour hold, and at that point, police classified them as witnesses, not co-conspirators. Chicago police superintendent says he wishes families of real victims here in Chicago got this much public attention. Police say they tracked these two brothers down via the ride-share car service that they used. They looked at more than 50 cameras, interviewed 100 people, all leading up to Jussie Smollett turning himself into police this morning. Now he will appear before a judge in the courthouse behind me, scheduled for 1:30 local time this afternoon. Harris.
Matt Finn, a lot of information. We'll cover that as it happens today live. Thank you.
He said, "This MAGA country punches me right in the face." So I punched him back. I noticed the rope around my neck and I started screaming.
Before he was exposed, Jussie Smollett tied his attack to President Trump and his election campaign themes specifically. And far before the facts were in, and police had gathered all the evidence, Hollywood politicians and the media, some of them, appeared to buy Smollett's narrative. Watch.
Police say they beat him up, poured an unknown chemical over him, and at some point during the incident wrapped a rope around the actor's neck. In a later interview, he told them they were yelling MAGA country as they beat him.
Connect the dots. This is what happens. If you are in a position of power and you hate people,
Senator Cory Booker said the vicious attack on actor Jussie was an attempted modern-day lynching. Now to that attack on a star of the TV show Empire.
A Hollywood star who's black and gay, and now the victim of a heinous crime.
Jussie Smollett from the hit show Empire was attacked and beaten early this morning in Chicago, and police say it could be a hate crime.
You may have already told us, but I'm so shaken by the story I forgot. I know he walked himself to the hospital. Do we know how he is now?
This is America in 2019. And an opinion writer for the Boston Herald with this quote: "The only reason this bogus story from a borderline celeb wasn't dismissed as ridiculous was because it gave the Trump-hating propagandists posing as reporters a chance to smear the president. It's the same reason the press packed former Governor Bill Weld's speech in New Hampshire last week. Weld's campaign, means more Trump bashing, so they're all in. Some lawmakers and 2020 candidates also weighed in with early support for Smollett, including Senator Kamala Harris and Senator Cory Booker. After initial reports, Booker said Smollett was a victim of attempted modern-day lynching. Days later, he backed off and said he would reserve judgment until all the facts are out." There's a list, and we can go into that. What is your first reaction to this, Ari?
Look, first of all, I just have to say, I think he's a small-minded man who's going to get what he deserves. And what he's really done here is expose one of the cultural issues going on in America, which is this victimhood chase. That if you can show all the right pieces of victimhood, in this case, race, sexual orientation, and an anti-Trump element, you've combined nitro and glycerin, and you know the press will cover it. And that's what he did. Look at the press's initial reaction to this. They just yielded. They rolled over because it had everything juicy that they wanted, including the anti-Trump element. Where was accuracy? Where was the truth?
Were there red flags in the beginning?
There were a number of red flags, the first being that this was at 2 a.m. when the polar vortex, one of the coldest times in the history of the country, was coming through. MAGA country is not exactly Chicago. Now, it's one thing to take his claims seriously, as the police did. They made it very clear that we didn't treat him differently because he's a celebrity. We'd take all hate crimes and treat them equally. However, the issue now is that we see a lot of people saying that they're really disappointed in Jussie Smollett for making up this hoax, right? Celebrities, people in the media, but they're not apologizing to those that they smeared. And the police chief in Chicago conveniently left out today during his remarks about his disappointment. He conveniently left out the political element of this. This was not just about a young black gay man making up a hate crime based on just racism. This was about him accusing millions of Trump supporters of being racist. If you support MAGA, let's not forget, in the letter that he sent, that he made up, there was a man hanging from a noose and MAGA next to it, which is in a gun next to it, which is a death threat. So he didn't just smear the city of Chicago. He smeared millions and millions of people the media has been trying to paint as racist for 2 years.
And there is a layering, Morgan, in terms of the effort legally against him now, because if it's proven that that note that also sort of perpetrated this further talk about what had happened with him, if that was what he was saying was evidence that something was coming, the FBI now has offered to take a bite of the apple too. They want to see what the truth is.
Right, as they should, because, you think every officer, whether it was the FBI or the police department that are working on this, are not working on the at least 18 people that have been killed. A news report today said there was a 1-year-old, right? So there's so many victims here, whether it's the people in Chicago whose family are dealing with real murders, whether it's the number of anti-LGBTQ and hate crimes that have actually gone up in this country, all of those people who are victims. But what I think is fascinating is that this story is going on at a time when Ambassador Rick Grinnell, the president's openly gay ambassador, is pushing to decriminalize homosexuality, which is illegal in at least 71 countries. They recently hanged someone in Iran for being gay. So I think everyone who has came out, what I would like to suggest is everyone who came out and jumped the gun on this story and bashed Trump supporters, did all this, why don't you look at the effort that Ambassador Rick Grinnell is doing and channel some positive energy to decriminalize homosexuality in 71 countries. That's what you can do to make up for the grave errors in judgment that I think you had over the past week.
Well, and to add to that, I mean, what the superintendent of Chicago said today was, we have been solving other homicides throughout this entire thing. We don't, divert the resources, but it does cast a shadow over those people who come forward with legitimate cases, which is what you're saying, Morgan.
Well, and to Morgan's point, the FBI statistics say for the last 3 years, hate crimes are up in this country significantly, as much as 20% by some estimates.
Do you think he took advantage of that?
I don't know.
Potentially.
I don't know, but if he himself knew he was taking advantage of that or even knew the reality, the problem is hate crime is a serious problem in this country, and his irresponsibility in this action has made it harder possibly for other victims to get believed in this situation.
Right.
And that, I think, is a real problem here. We also have real people using political language to threaten violence that now may not be taken seriously, like this Coast Guard lieutenant we saw in Maryland. That's a huge story as well. And the police chief, when he started that press conference and said, I wish all of you showed up when there was a young child killed by guns. In Chicago, I wish there was that much attention paid to those kids who were killed.
Yeah, the criminals who are carrying out those crimes. But the other element of this that is important to talk about is the rush to judgment on social media, on Twitter, and the role that journalists and people in Hollywood have played in going on Twitter and not actually verifying sources, retweeting things they haven't verified, and saying things maybe before they've actually thought about what the facts of the case are, what's actually going on, does this make sense? And I think in media, the big question is, should journalists be held to the same standard on their Twitter feeds as they are when they're filing a story that's gone through an editor?
I think the answer to that is yes. And there were those of us, and Ari, I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but we may have just in the past with sort of this Twitter jump in. It's an added layer of responsibility on those of us who call ourselves journalists. And there's a reason why many of us didn't click on that. Howard Kurtz and I have talked about this. We didn't click on that and we didn't do it with Covington. We didn't do it. I asked a question, if this is not true, will there be false charges? Very early on, I want to know all the information. But that's age and experience, potentially.
I make the distinction between Hollywood people or activists and what they say on Twitter versus journalists. There's nothing different between Twitter and writing something or putting something on radio or TV. It's a communication by a journalist.
But has that line been crossed by journalists?
But of course the line's been crossed. Twitter has exposed journalism for what it is, and in this instance, how many other reporters are covering it now? I watched CNN this morning, and they haven't made a mention of the MAGA issue. Now that they say that the story was wrong, they have whitewashed the MAGA from this matter. Now, when the story first broke, they were all over the fact that it was a MAGA.
Why do you think
this is MAGA country? But now that we know it's wrong, they're only focusing on race. They're focusing on sexual orientation. They're focusing on he shouldn't have done it. But they don't go back to the fact that he erroneously claimed it was MAGA. Why? Because it makes the Trump people be sympathetic, and they won't do that.
Wow. That's a lot. Well, it has been going on for months and paid for with your tax dollars. Now it appears Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation will soon wrap up. The new head at the Justice Department will decide how much of those findings we all get to see. And it looks like Democrats are ready for a fight if the report is not made public.
The special counsel needs to bring his evidence forward, if he has any, and let's get on with it. The American people deserve to have this thing wrapped up and over with.
It's been hanging over the Trump presidency for months, but now the special counsel investigation may be finally coming to an end. Several DOJ sources tell Fox News that Robert Mueller could submit his findings to Attorney General William Barr soon. But we understand that President Trump's legal team has received no formal notification that the investigation has wrapped up. Special counsel guidelines stipulate that the Attorney General determines the public release of these reports, but questions remain over which findings in it will become available for everyone to see. President Trump says that decision is in William Barr's hands. Watch.
Should the Mueller report be released while you're abroad next week?
That'll be totally up to the new Attorney General. He's a tremendous man, a tremendous person who really respects this country and respects the Justice Department. So that'll be totally up to him, the new Attorney General.
Mr. President, what do you expect from Australia?
Now, I guess from what I understand, that will be totally up to the Attorney General.
Meantime, Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal is outlining what happens if the AG does not provide what he considers to be a comprehensive picture of the report.
There'll be subpoenas from Congress, including, I hope, from the Senate Judiciary Committee, where I sit, but there will also be a public perception of cover-up. Because if William Barr believes, I think he does, that a sitting president can't be indicted, I disagree with him, and he brings no charges that Mueller says can't be brought, and if there are also no public disclosure, the public rightly will feel that there is a cover.
So, Ari, the country has been through a lot on this. People want transparency when it comes to the report, whatever it says. What is your take on the latest news that it may be wrapping up again?
We've been through a lot of damaging issues because of this, and they have to be looked into. But to understand the division that this has created, the people who just think Donald Trump, they never accepted the election. And so they sought a criminal path to get him out of office. That's what they want to believe, to the point where the Democratic vice presidential candidate said that Donald Trump engaged in treason. We do need, as a nation, to have a full, fair, transparent accounting of what has been found. And Bob Mueller, who I have defended since the day Bob Mueller was hired, because I still believe in his integrity, he owes it to stand with William Barr at a news conference, and Mueller needs to explain the facts, and Barr needs to explain what will or will not happen as a result. And the country needs to know. We need to know everything we can, with the exception of the counterintelligence information, which may have to stay secret. But anything involving culpability, anything involving lack of culpability, this country deserves to know it all. So we can either say this has been hysteria, and the president is owed an apology, or the president colluded, or his team colluded, and we need to know that too. The country deserves to know it.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And we always talk about collusion or conspiracy and that piece of it. There's also the obstruction of justice piece. So there are a couple pieces here of outstanding business that Bob Mueller was tasked to look into. I absolutely believe that you will hear pressure from both sides of the aisle to have this report released publicly. I think it would be terrible for the country if it wasn't. And there are a lot of Democrats, Ari, who don't fall into that camp of they never accepted the election, they just want Donald Trump to be impeached. I put myself into that. No, but don't laugh. I put myself into that category. Donald Trump won the presidency. I also think Bob Mueller was right to be appointed, and these are issues we need answers to. There are a lot of Democrats who I think fall into a category of there's shady stuff that's been reported, but we are waiting for Mueller to tell us the whole truth.
Way too many Democrats jumped off the rail at the beginning and accepted the worst-case fears, boycotted his inauguration,
but a lot
never
didn't.
stopped.
But
Marie, those are in two different lanes. What you're saying is shady stuff has been reported. Well, who's been reporting it? Because this has been a pretty leak-free investigation.
Court filings from Mueller, court filings from Bob Mueller, and in the Southern District related to the investigation.
Okay, but that's not reporting, because that would be the media.
Well,
I do think that there have been some missteps there, too, within some of the, jump to the rush to judgment within the media on, oh, it's wrapping up. No, it's not. This person's carrying out a box. No, they're not. I mean, we have been kind of perched to see what would happen, but some people are not patient, like Representative Al Green, one of the Democrats, who would love to see this president be impeached. Can't wait for the investigation to wrap up. Now you see, a movement among a Democrat-led House. Where are they going to fall? Are they waiting for Mueller's investigation to wrap up? What if it's not next week? Are they willing to wait for the facts? And then at the end of the day, the man who was just put into the position of Attorney General, even the president had said, didn't know this, actually has a really good relationship and professional past with Robert Mueller. Democrats have said they believe Robert Mueller and his, ability to get to the truth. William Barr has been our AG before. Some Democrats, not a lot, but some voted for him, for his confirmation. When all is said and done, if those things don't exist, collusion and those other things, collusion's not a crime, conspiracy, if those things don't exist, will Democrats move on?
But Morgan,
will they let it go?
To that point, Democrats seem to be downplaying now the possible results of the Mueller investigation in case they don't get what they want, which is why they're now launching all of their own investigations.
Well, but I would just say to keep in mind, and Marie knows this well because we both worked in government and the intelligence community, that this is a counterintelligence investigation. So the caveat that I would make to releasing the full report is there may be things that aren't disclosed because it would reveal sources and methods and that sort of thing. So keep that in mind. But I think the audience that matters the most here is not the House. It's not even the American people. It's Senate Republicans, because Senate Republicans are the ones who are ultimately going to decide the fate of this president when the report does come out. And so that's my real audience and who I'm looking to see what they say next week.
All right, well, speaking of next week. In the meantime, President Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, agreeing to publicly testify next Wednesday in front of Congress after a federal judge granted Cohen a 2-month postponement to report to prison as he recovers from surgery. House Oversight Chair Elijah Cummings also announcing that a list of topics has been agreed upon, and lawmakers will limit their scope of questioning after consulting with the Justice Department. Ranking Republican Jim Jordan not happy, writing in a statement, quote, "Giving a platform to Cohen is beneath the dignity of Congress, and I am saddened that Democrats have sunk so low as to promote an admitted liar just to satisfy Tom Steyer and the political forces on the left, who will settle for nothing less than impeachment." And interesting timing as the testimony comes on the same day President Trump is overseas for a second summit with North Korea's leaders. So, Marie, Michael Cohen is an admitted liar. He's been prosecuted and convicted and admitted that he was guilty of lying to Congress. So is this a witness that people should be paying attention to?
Well, I think we actually heard from both sides of the aisle, many of them, not Jim Jordan, but many of them in Congress saying, Michael Cohen came into our house and lied to us. We need to get him back up here. And I think there was broad bipartisan support for that concept, that he needed to come back and fix his testimony because they do want the truth. So it will be very interesting to see next week. Michael Cohen is testifying in public and then in private to the intelligence community. Some of that may unfortunately leak, but I think it will be interesting to see how Michael Cohen answers some of these questions, what insight he's able to give. But look, you lied to Congress, go back and fix it.
Morgan, this comes at the same time that President Trump is going to be holding his second summit with Kim Jong-un in Vietnam.
Tell the truth.
It'll be interesting to see, I think, what the media does in terms of the coverage, whether they will be covering this historic summit or giving more oxygen to Michael Cohen.
I don't have a problem with Cohen going back to testify. That's up to the chairman of the committee, right? That's the prerogative. And certainly when the Republicans were in power, they called plenty of people up that irritated President Obama. It's part of the game. Everybody plays the game. So I don't have an issue with that. I do have an issue with the timing. I think when the president is overseas in one of the most pivotal negotiations likely of his presidency, playing politics during then, I would say move it a day or two. Don't have it while the president is overseas conducting such a crucial negotiation.
Well, Ari, the timing is interesting too. I know he had surgery and he canceled a few times, and then there were reports that he was out and medical questions and blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is now he's got a 2-month delay before he goes to prison. We may see more of him.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is kind of like watching a rerun. I don't know what the juice is left.
Do they have Twitter in prison?
We've heard what he said. We know what he's going to say. Look, there's only one new question I would have for Michael Cohen. The most damning thing Michael Cohen said was that the president made the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels in a Playboy model, and that's raised the FEC, Federal Election Commission, issue, and people argue about how serious that is. But one question I'd ask Cohen is, did the president ever authorize you to make hush money payments to other women prior to these two? Because if he did, it shows that this is not campaign related, that this is a pattern for Donald Trump, and therefore the allegation that this is somehow a new development in the middle of a campaign, I'd like factually to know that question. Other than that, I don't think Michael Cohen has anything left to offer to anybody other than to try to save his own skin, because he is off to prison for perjury.
Well, and talking on the Hill wouldn't mitigate his prison circumstances, but if he became useful to a different investigation, perhaps he could. If that investigation were to wrap up next week, he better move quickly.
The problem with this is the Democrats need to remember Republicans got themselves in a lot of trouble investigating everything.
I think it worked for Republicans.
Have that same risk. No, I think it backfired on Republicans.
I totally disagree.
Policy is the way forward to do things the American people actually want you to do. They can get pretty exhausted, especially in divided government, if the only thing you can do is investigate the people you don't like.
I think the multiple investigations into Hillary Clinton painted a picture of her publicly that it was very hard for her to overcome. Some of it her own fault. I am not removing her from responsibility. I think investigation after investigation.
But she met that with elitism. She didn't meet it with.
Fine, Harris, but like the narrative that people would say about her was in large part formed by those multiple investigations that
Republicans
Republicans
would say she wasn't investigated
enough. That she was a liar. But we will move on. A growing showdown between President Trump and top Democrats over his emergency declaration to get a border wall. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is setting a vote to try and block it. And now one Republican senator is breaking with the president on the issue. Will others follow? Or will the GOP stand with the president on building the wall? That's up next.
House Democrats are planning to force a vote as early as tomorrow on a resolution blocking President Trump's emergency declaration for a border wall. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is now urging members to sign on as co-sponsors by tonight. Democrats are also looking to get GOP votes. If the resolution passes, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer would be able to force a vote in the GOP-led Senate. Republican Senator Susan Collins said yesterday that she would support a resolution of disapproval on the emergency declaration. And the Hill has identified 9 other Republican senators who may also vote to block the president's order. The White House promises a veto if the measure passes the Senate. All right, you are just brilliant with messaging. You've worked in a White House. What would you be telling this White House to do right now?
Well, this is a hard one for me because I'm in a different spot on this. I think if Congress had never passed an agreement on the budget to keep the government open, then the president would have been right to declare an emergency because we need to protect the border. Congress enacted a compromise, and whether you like it or you don't like it, Congress acted, the president signed it into law. So I don't think he had the right grounds to declare an emergency here, particularly when he could have gotten so much of the funding additional to what was appropriated for the border as a result of the money he tapped from Treasury and the money he tapped from Justice. So he could have gotten so much of what he wanted without throwing down the gauntlet on emergency. And I am one who believes that if you call something an emergency, it should be bipartisan. It should be something that most people shake their head and go, yeah, thank goodness you did it, because this is an emergency.
Okay, so the White House won't call you on this one.
No, I have caller ID.
All right. So, Katie, is the president, though, right about being able to reallocate some funds to get this done if he doesn't call an emergency?
I mean, according to some of the statutes that Congress has enabled and given the president power to do, he does. You have Mike Lee, who is a strict constitutionalist, saying, look, I don't like it. It might be unconstitutional, but it's legal because Congress has ceded that power to the executive branch. And so my problem with this is, maybe if Congress spent just as much time as they're doing to write this resolution of condemnation as they would solving the crisis that is one, that everyone has admitted is a crisis, whether you agree it's an emergency, maybe it's different, but there is a humanitarian crisis, it's getting worse, and the bill that Congress just passed is actually adding gasoline to the humanitarian fire. So maybe they should spend more of their time actually coming up with solutions to the current problem rather than doing this, this symbolism of we're condemning what the president has done.
The pessimistic flow of where we are, though, right now, Morgan, is that that's not politically expedient. What Katie is talking about, they're actually solving a problem.
Yeah, and I think what's ultimately going to happen here is the House will probably pass this, and in the Senate, Susan Collins has said she will already support it, and I think you only need, 4 Republicans in the Senate.
They say they have 8 or 9. I mean,
but what I don't think they will have is a veto-proof majority in the Senate. So ultimately, if this does get to the president, this is a political exercise on behalf of the Democrats because the president will clearly veto this bill.
But it will also be interesting how other Republicans in the Senate, and I mentioned this yesterday on the couch, there are a number of Republicans in the Senate up for re-election in 2020. People like Sonny Perdue and Tom Tillis and Joni Ernst, people who...
David Perdue, Sonny's
secretary. Sorry. I'm having a moment. That was good.
Thank you. Buddies. I love the Perdue.
Yes, Senator Perdue. So I think just having to put Republicans on the record on an issue that many of them have spoken out about in the past with its executive power, they've spoken out on this issue. Getting them on the record, I think, is an important thing to do because they've been so outspoken. And there are a number of Republicans besides the Collins and Murkowski who have a political calculation to make.
It's all about politics.
But who have a political calculation to make about 2020 in their own re-election.
Before we have to scoot quickly here, Ari, I just want to get your opinion about something. Other presidents have declared emergencies, right? And they've used their executive order. Or executive privilege to do that. How is this seen differently? Democrats are threatening, and you say, well, maybe this could happen if you wanted to do it over gun violence, that sort of thing. But how is this different?
No, look, I think that's a fair point. And in the tit-for-tat world that politics is today, that's a justifiable position to take. And certainly
other presidents have done it.
Well, Barack Obama's pen and phone. When President Obama said he could not do DACA and did DACA, he is the one who started this path to undermine rule of law. When President Obama found a way to appropriate money under Obamacare that wasn't appropriated, President Obama started it again. So I have a hard time also saying that Donald Trump is doing something that wasn't done before, especially by his immediate predecessor.
Do you think, though, it creates a snowball effect?
Yes, and that's why I oppose it.
It's the money issue,
I'm trying to stand on a higher ground here that I think should unite the country and make us say emergency should be an emergency.
That's so sweet.
And so, it's not going to... Yeah, I understand that. But having served, I like to believe that,
Yeah,
and I
no,
think
I
that's
know.
where we should all be, frankly.
Yeah.
I can play tit-for-tat politics just as well as anybody else. Sometimes, especially after you leave government, you realize you shouldn't.
So how do you get it done? Because you've got walls in 600 plus miles. You've got barriers.
Here's the
You
thing,
don't.
Harris. The president could be
Yes,
celebrating
you
everything.
do. Have you been to
Don't get it
California?
done.
He could be building.
You
he
don't
could be
get it
building the
done.
55 miles
People
that he now
don't
has
want
an
it.
appropriation for. He can be building even more than 55 with the additional funds he can legitimately tap. He can be holding ceremonies to talk about the new judges that are a part of this bill, all the law enforcement equipment. This could be a celebration, moment after moment after moment, of a media moment for the president. Instead, we're stuck here in the morass of is it or is it not an emergency? Will it get struck down in court, and will Congress act against him? He's picked through the emergency a whole bunch of trappings that are going to they take away from all the celebrations he could have had over his enacting border
He could still
security.
do it. He could
But
still
he's
have
got
this.
both now instead of just wins.
All right, we'll move on. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders planning to make his second run for president as a Democrat. But an old interview from the 1980s has revealed just how socialist, I think that should say how socialistic, the Democratic Socialist really is. We'll break it down next.
Senator Bernie Sanders plans to sign a pledge saying he will run as a Democrat in 2020 and govern as one if he's elected in compliance with new DNC rules. This coming as an old interview resurfaces from the mid-'80s when Sanders was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont. In that interview, Sanders was asked about breadlines in Nicaragua and his support for the Socialist Party ruling the country at the time. He said, quote, "It's funny sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing. In other countries, people don't line up for food. The rich get the food, and the poor starve to death." Okay, Ari, so we're now going back through every interview Bernie Sanders has ever given when he said many things that seem out of step, not just with most Americans, but I think with most of the Democratic Party. And I don't think he's going to actually be the nominee.
Well, this shows it doesn't matter what you call yourself. What matters is what you think. And he thinks like a socialist. So
He calls himself a socialist.
Yes, and people, Democrats defend him and say, well, he's a democratic socialist, as if it's different.
I don't defend him. I don't think he's a Democrat
All
of
right, let
any
me answer
kind.
your question. Look, the problem that Democrats have is the two people who are providing the intellectual energy for the party right now are socialists.
That's not true.
AOC and Bernie.
No way.
Stop interrupting. Those are the two people who are driving the Democrats' intellectual ideas. This is who their policies are being made after. Medicare for all the things that Bernie ran on before and AOC is pushing before with the Green New Deal. This is the intellectual army that the Democrats are following. And this is the problem. This is one of Donald Trump's greatest strengths. With Democrats running like this, it provides a tremendous boost for Donald Trump.
A strong Democrat that we often see on this network, Antoine Seawright, was on Overtime with me yesterday, and he said that Democrats are actually looking at trying to see through the DNC if they can block Bernie from running as a Democrat.
Again,
how is it that as I stood next to the aisle where he was at the DNC convention, looking with a straight line face emoji because he had all those people supporting him, but Hillary got it anyway, he nominated her. If he's not a Democrat, how did that happen at the Democrat convention? Did I hallucinate?
because people didn't like Hillary. And
Whoa. But that doesn't mean he's not a Democrat now.
he's technically not a member of the Democratic Party.
So how did he do that?
Because he got people to vote for him because they didn't like Hillary. My point to Ari's
No. How was he able to nominate her?
Because he ran in he got on the ballot.
Can we get back to the socialism part of this?
Sure, yes.
I think Bernie Sanders should actually be taken very seriously in this sense. The majority of millennials, which is a generation that is 90 million people strong, believe that socialism is better than capitalism. The 2020 election is going to be a fight between the free market and socialist policies. Bernie Sanders believes in Marxism and communism. He's praised communist Russia, as you just saw with the quote there. He thinks that breadlines are an example of a government actually functioning. He wants America to be like Venezuela. He's on the side of Maduro currently right now. He doesn't want the United States to go on behalf of the people there and bolstering them. So, we should take him seriously. He wants a different vision for America than it has been. And so, based on the number of people who believe in that ideology now, I think we have to really combat it with talking about the detrimental effects communism and Marxism and socialism had on a global scale for centuries.
But Morgan, the reason I was so was pushing back on Ari is because as a Democrat who is listening to all of the candidates, you have a large majority of the candidates running who are not socialists and who are running on
Medicare for all.
who are not running on social. That's not a socialist technically system.
Abolish private insurance
When we talk
companies.
about socialism as a political system, it's actually not, Katie. So, Morgan, I think the caricature, if it's someone like Bernie, will be easy to make, but I don't think it's going to be Bernie. It'll be someone like Biden or Klobuchar.
So the Democrats have a path to success in 2018. What is that? And Jessica Tarlev, our colleague, has talked about this a lot on the couch, which is running moderate people in these swing districts. The problem is that I think, and I say this, Marie, having been a card-carrying member of the Republican establishment in the 2016 primary, and I think that you are a Democrat establishment. You understand that a moderate, someone like Biden or Klobuchar, is someone who could threaten the president. Unfortunately, I think you're in the same position that I was in 2016, whenever so many of us in the Republican establishment didn't understand how angry our base was, how fed up our base was. And it wasn't until then candidate Trump came on the scene that many of us had our eyes open and said, wow, we don't understand the palpable anger. And I think that's where the Democrat establishment is in 2020 is exactly where we were in 2016.
We'll see. We'll put it to the test as the primaries get started. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not the only Democratic freshman lawmaker on Capitol Hill making waves. Congresswoman Omar Ilhan still under fire for her tweets earlier this month.
Omar.
Sorry?
No,
Did I reverse that?
They had it reversed.
That some, even in her own party, thought were anti-Semitic. She's reportedly apologizing again. We'll tell you to who and whether this will be enough to put the issue to rest next.
Freshman Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is now reportedly apologizing again for tweets she posted earlier this month condemned as anti-Semitic. This time she's apologized to several Jewish groups in a confidential conference call. The Minnesota lawmaker came under fire earlier this month for tweets suggesting American lawmakers were motivated by money to support Israel, and claimed it referred to powerful lobbying groups. But critics, including Democratic leadership, quickly criticized her remarks. Ari, I know that this is a story that has really bothered you and me both. We tweeted and talked about it a lot. When is an apology enough? Is this apology enough? I mean, she's sort of had to apologize for this multiple times. Should we take her at face value, accept the apology, and move on?
You know, I've never been much for the politics of apologies. They don't really matter to me that much. What matters to me much more is what do you think is in your heart.
Right.
And what's so revealing about her tweet saying it's the Benjamins, it's the $100 bills that make people support Israel, it misses the power of ideas. And the idea of Israel is it is the one bastion in a bad region of the world where there are no democracies, where Israel is the most pro-Western, pro-American, only democratic, free state that is a peaceful state that was attacked by all its neighbors the day it was created. That's a country worth supporting as Americans. So when I hear that the reason Americans support it is because of money, this is terribly bothersome, especially because it's the anti-Semitic trope that everybody has used for thousands of years.
Marie, Ari brings up a good point to the larger point of Democratic support for the state of Israel, which has waned, I think, by many accounts. It's no longer the bipartisan issue that it once was. Where do you think that the Democrat Party is moving as it relates to support for the state of Israel?
Well, actually, I think American support for Israel has dipped a bit, and in part that's been a reaction to Israeli politics and Prime Minister Netanyahu going farther right. And so you can criticize Israel's politics without being anti-Semitic. You can hold them to account for policies without being anti-Semitic. On the question of this Congresswoman, I think it's a good thing that she reached out to Jewish groups and wanted to talk to them. Like, what's the alternative? Not doing it? I don't obviously like her tweets or think that they were good things to do or believe, but if she can have a dialogue with Jewish groups and maybe learn from them, that's a place to start, right?
Do you think she ought to be on a Foreign Affairs Committee at this point, or do you think she
Yes,
should
I'm
have
fine
to
with her
learn
being
that?
on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
She shouldn't be on the Foreign Affairs Committee because she sympathizes with terrorists. She laughed about the fact that Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah are put on terrorist lists during an interview a couple of years ago when she took a college course on it. She didn't think that it should be, that we speak about terrorist groups as if they're these boogeyman-type organizations. She regularly does events for CARE, which was an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation project for funneling money to Hamas. So there are issues beyond her anti-Semitism, which has repeated itself, that are very concerning considering her high position on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Final word.
Yeah, I want to yield my time to Ari because, you're in a unique position. I watch you on Twitter, and I just want you to maybe share with our audience your perspective on it.
Well, first of all, the decline of support for Israel has been a decades-long problem for the Democratic Party. It has nothing to do with Netanyahu. It happened way before he came into office. The Democrats have never supported Israel the way Republicans have, and the Democratic support has collapsed to neutrality. Republican support has surged.
We're going to have to go, but we will be back with more Outnumbered in just a moment.